You're listening to audio from the Decidedly podcast. For more information, find us on Instagram at Decidedly Podcast.
So you know how you were telling me the other day you had to get a massage and it made you uncomfortable because you had to get in a position that made you feel vulnerable, let's say?
Yeah.
Okay. So I had to go in. I told you I'm going for my annual exam, and they found something that they needed to explore. So they send you to I don't want to get too detailed with it because this story is going to go south quick already on its own. And so you have to go to another doctor. She sends me to somebody else. So they have to, as part of this process, I got to get an MRI. Okay. And it's in my abdomen. Then they see something in the bladder, and they need to scope the bladder, he says. And he says, it'll be a little uncomfortable. I said, well, now what do you mean scope the bladder? He goes, well, we put a scope up there, and, we kind of look around, make sure everything's okay. I was like, oh, and I ask a few more questions, and they get into the bladder exactly the way you think they are. And
they go up the exit ramp.
Yes. Mm-hmm. The understatement of the year was you're going to feel a little bit of discomfort. And when you say go up the exit ramp, that is imagine like a river has, for the life of this river, has only gone one direction. And then if it were a way that you just turn and go the other direction, all kinds of chaos would ensue. Mm-hmm. That's how it felt. So they're scoping the bladder by putting this camera up the off-ramp, and it's about the size of a pencil. Yeah. And so they're doing this, and he leaves, and he says, all right, so you have to get ready, and they put this sheet over you with a hole in it. And so you're laying on the table with a sheet on you with a hole in it. And oh, by the way, Mom comes.
Is the hole the size of the pencil too?
So I could not keep Mom out of the room because she wanted to see this. And so she's very intrigued. She's loving every minute of this. And the doctor says, all right, so the nurse will come in and she'll rub a little deadener on it. And, that'll deaden the area and it'll be fine. I'm like, oh, okay. So this will be nice. And also it'll be deadened so it won't hurt. And so the nurse comes in and with the deadening gel, and I'm like, oh, this won't be so bad. And a nurse is looking like a weightlifter, let's say. It's so, and what I thought she was going to do was rub this deadening gel on the area, let's say.
Yeah.
That's not what she does. She squirts it.
Like turkey bastes it up inside there.
Bastes it up the off-ramp, right?
All right.
Yeah, it's going against the stream. And you've never had that experience before.
No.
In your life, you've never had this experience, and it's not good. And so she's doing that, and then the guy comes in, and it's not deadened or if it was, it'd have been horrible if it wasn't. He scopes the bladder. And Mom's her eyes are big. She's really enjoying this. And then they go to pull this thing out. And so now everything's going the right direction. And it feels like I'm peeing all over the place. And I'm so mad at this point that I just say, I hope I am. Because I'm not looking. I hope that's what's happening because I'm so irritated by this doctor and how he's misled me on the level of pain that this was amounting to. And it hurts so bad that he leaves and he goes, all right. Or he finishes. He's like, all right, you good? And I'm like, I don't think so. And they have to bring the nurse back in with a fan and water to give me. Because it was
pathetic.
I thought I was going to pass out. It hurt so bad. Have you ever had something hurt so bad you thought you were going to pass out from the pain?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how it was. So anyway, that was my horror story.
That sounds like a horror story.
It was.
Speaking of horror stories, now that nobody's listening,
Mike's going to hate that intro, I think.
Mike Pecci is a Boston filmmaker, photographer, and creative director with a contagious enthusiasm for storytelling. With over 20 years experience in the industry, he's made a name for himself by his ability to create immersive cinematic experiences that really transport the audience to another world. His passion for visual storytelling is evident from his award-winning short films to music videos and commercials for brands like Nike, Converse, Reebok. His recent project, 12KM, is a testament to his creativity and willingness to take creative risks. The interactive horror film is only available to watch by messaging him on Instagram. It allows viewers to shape the story as it unfolds. Whether he's creating a horror film, commercial, personal photography project, Mike's goal is always the same: tell a compelling story that resonates with the audience. Through his work, he invites viewers to see the world in a new way and to feel something real and meaningful. When he's not creating films, he hosts the successful podcast In Love with the Process, where he gives a no-filtered, honest look at what it takes to walk away from a normal life to chase your dreams. We learned a lot in our conversation with Mike. We talked about the filmmaking process. We talked about the inside baseball of the filmmaking industry, how directing a film is a lot like leading a company, and how to bring ideas to reality, whether you are a business owner or an artist. I think you're going to really enjoy this. We had a lot of fun. Mike's a super cool guy, and he's got some unique takes. Stick around. My name's Sanger Smith. As always, I'm with my dad, Sean Smith, and this is Decidedly. I think you've ruined all future movies for me.
How did he ruin all future movies?
This is the only way to watch a film, is to watch it and then wake up the next day and talk to the director.
Be able to talk. Yeah, I want to be able to talk to Steven Spielberg next time I watch a movie, and just.
Oh, so that's what happened. Okay, cool. I'm in.
I do have a bitch though, because I sent my my answers to the question, the favorite horror movie, expecting that I would get the link. I didn't make the cut.
Well, you must have sucked.
No, it must have.
All right. We'll get into why you didn't make the cut. We'll get into that.
Well, I took it personally.
We gotta give people the context here. So the way I got connected with you and your work, Mike, was I saw somewhere on Instagram, I don't even know, it was this post that said, "Oh, Mike Pecci made this new awesome horror film called 12 Kilometers. And you got to check it out. But the only way to get it is to DM him your top 3 horror movies. And if he likes your list, then you'll get the link." It also said you have to compliment his beard.
I didn't write that.
Maybe that's why I didn't make the cut.
So this is what I said to Mike.
It's not that the beard's not stunning, Mike. It's just that I didn't compliment.
It's beautiful. Yeah. And that you might have missed that key component. But I sent Mike a list of my 3 movies, and I said I only bow to the beard of Christ. But I got the link, man. I'm just you're not as cool.
Well,
as
I didn't.
All right. Whenever I saw that, I was like, I'm sure this movie is going to be great, which it was, right? And I want to talk about that in a second. But the process of setting it up and promoting it was incredibly unique.
Thanks, man. Yeah. All right. Well, let me start at the beginning and say that this movie was a movie I made back in 2016. And this was a movie that I made never with the intention of it going to the public. This was a proof of concept film for a feature version that, as a young director, one of the moves that you can do when you send out a script, whoever's reading that script is seeing it through their own mind's eye. So they may read something and go, "This is the Goonies." And as they read it, all they see is the Goonies, like the way the Goonies looks and everything else. And meanwhile, I'm the guy back at home going, it's not the Goonies. You know what I mean? Yeah. So what you try to do, what I do is I do these proof of concept movies that will set tone, atmosphere, vibe. So those go out first. And they're also a great way to get like studio execs to even read your stuff because they love watching things. And especially if it's a short piece, they'll tune in and they'll go, oh, I like this guy's stuff. I like his tone. I like his vibe. Is there a feature here that we can make money off of? And then they go through the process of reading the script, knowing the vibe. And so initially the movie was made with that in mind. And the movie already went out for years and did the cycle. So like I got representation from it, and then it went to like Michael Bay's office. It went to Sam Raimi's office and ended up in Ridley Scott's office. And they're the ones developing the feature right now. So this was initially made for that. I have my own podcast and I have fans that have been following my stuff for a while. And I've always joked on my show and other people's shows that I would go and guest on. The guests, most recently I was on the Corridor podcast, I think it was, and they loved the movie. And they were saying on the show, they said, hey, how can our fans see the film? And, you know, I could be, you know, kind of a jerk sometimes. So I just said on the show, I go, yeah, if you want to send me your 3 favorite horror movies, and if I agree with you, I'll send you a link. just being a jerk about it. And that caught fire. And some random kid that then wrote to me and sent me his 3 favorite horror movies. And I would just get a few messages from folks. And so he sent it to me. And of course, the idea is that I'm asking you to engage with me because normally when I screen movies, I stand in the doorway of the movie theater and I meet everybody that comes in. Hey, what's going on? I'm Mike. Blah, 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 blah. So I have a personal connection with everybody. And I think what happens on the internet right now is that you make content and you dump it into the sea of mediocrity. Like you throw it up on YouTube and it just disappears. And I get nothing from it. Like there's a little ticker on the bottom and it says, oh, you know, like a couple 100,000 saw this. I don't know who those people are. I don't get it. So in my mind, I was like, that's what I'm doing this for. So I can personally have a connection with these folks. And so this kid he saw it and he did a post that went on TikTok and Instagram and it caught fire. Like and it was because he was genius about it. At the end of it, he wrote, is this pretentious or is this genius?
I remember that.
Yeah, I didn't have any control of that. So he said that and it caught fire, dude. And so like the next day I had a few thousand DMs. And then the day after that, I had 100,000 DMs. And so I don't know if you guys use Instagram, but when you're not following people, it ends up in this little box in the corner and it says 99 plus. And I open it up and I go, holy shit. And so now I'm going through this going, well, I have to answer all these DMs. So first couple of days I would open the box and it would only load about 25 messages. I'd get through and answer 25 and then that page would reload and there was 25 new ones. And I'm like, there's no way I'm going to get through all the stuff. So I didn't see your message. So that's the only reason why you didn't even get the opportunity.
Let's go with that. Yeah. All right.
Yeah. So what were your 3 horror films? What were your choices?
You know, it was interesting because I like the idea of the exclusivity of the concept. Right. And I've been to some bars that have used that same approach. There's a bar in downtown Fort Worth that you have to know the password to get in, you know, that kind of thing. And so I thought it was brilliant. And it was a little intimidating though, because I'm like, all right, you know, maybe Mike's going to shit on me, whatever these answers are. You know,
there's a chance that might happen.
Yeah, there's a chance. All right, so I'll give you my 3, and I actually wrote out the reasons why I gave you those 3. All right, so the first one was a garbage movie called The Legend of Boggy Creek. It came out in like 1972. All right.
Oh.
And the reason I put that down, it's just a classic sort of mystery monster movie, right? You know, in the vein of Creature from the Black Lagoon type thing. And the reason I wrote that down is that it was the first scary movie I remember seeing. I was only like 7 or 8 or something like that, and I shouldn't have seen this movie, but I did, and it just gave me nightmares. The other one was The Fly.
Which one? The original or Cronenberg?
All right. So the original one was the one I was thinking about. That actually came out before I was born, but my dad had shown it to me. Somebody like got re-released or something like that. And I remember
was that Vincent Price? I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. And we were watching it, in that scene where he's like turning into the fly. He gets in the chamber and the fly's in the chamber and they swap bodies and he turns into this fly. And he's sitting there as a fly and he's just going, help me. And I just remember that. And I saw that when I was a little kid, so it just scared the shit out of me.
Of course.
And the other was a more recent, although it's still older movie from 94, it was the Blair Witch Project.
It's on my list too.
And I wrote that down because I took the kids to the beach, like my kids and then my nieces and nephews. And so they were like, these 7 or 8 kids. And I said, oh, you guys want to watch a movie tonight? And they're like, yeah. I said, well, this is a true story. It's a documentary about this movie that these people found. And, it's a real thing. And they're like, oh, that doesn't sound, I said, just watch it. And so I had them believing it was a true story, and they watched
how it was designed to be watched.
Which is how it was done. I wanted everybody to have that experience that the filmmaker wanted, right? Because that was their gimmick. But anyway, so those were my 3. And
well, dude,
I had I had reasons why I put all of them.
Well, great responses. And I would say that you get the reason why I asked the question. So it isn't, I think a lot of folks, the weird thing, it's been a really interesting sort of psychological sort of experiment where people are like, I'm being judged. And first, the first question is like, what are my tastes? And so then you have to go through the process of trying to figure that out. And then the next one is like, there's this guy who is a director who probably likes more interesting shit than I do. So maybe he's going to judge me on that. And ultimately, that's not the reason I asked the question. I want to see what your movie experience, what you like from your movie experience. So your answers are, especially with the Blair Witch one, you like to be a part of sort of a scary vibe, sort of like a scary experience. There's no other way to put it. So like, that's why I do it. Like I'm an older brother. And so I love scaring the shit out of people. That's why I make movies.
Right.
And so if you come see one of my movies live, that's what it is. I'm spending all this time and money and energy crafting these things to try to genuinely freak you out. And that's what scary movies are to me. I think they've become something different recently, and I can get into all.
So what do you mean? What do you mean they've become something different?
Well, with the way that the business currently works, right? With Marvel and all these large tentpole movies, everybody, all these production companies or studios rather, they're all chasing the big win. So they're all chasing the big money. And so to get stuff in the cinema right now, it either has to be like dudes running around in underpants saving the world, or it has to be horror. So like those two things are what are making cash in the cinema. So you've lost a whole genre, a whole few genres of movies for theatrical. So like no one's financing, $30 million comedies anymore. They're trying to bring them back. Like Burt Kreischer's new movie is trying to bring that back, but no one has been financing those. And then drama sort of fell apart. And the streaming services kind of revived that stuff, but now everything has to be written to be a series and has to be drawn out to be a series.
It's hard to find a movie now you can watch. I find these titles. I'm like, that sounds interesting. And like, it's got 3 seasons. I'm like, I just want to watch an hour and a half movie.
It's because I
want to get involved in that.
It's just, dude, subscription-based services. It behooves them for you to stick around. Time is the commodity for them.
Yeah.
So with horror, what I found happening was that they would take a drama that they wanted to make and throw a few scary sequences in that drama or some like scary music in that drama and then market it as a horror movie. And so now you're seeing...
Wait, what are some examples of that?
It's always a risky thing to talk about. I would say there's a piece of me that feels like, this is an unpopular opinion. There's a piece of me that feels like Hereditary is that. And like everybody loves Hereditary. That was like on most people's lists. So, who cares what I think about it? But when you watch that movie, most of that movie is a family drama. And there are a
Mhm.
couple of sequences, without spoiling it for anybody, there's a couple of intense sequences that happen in it. It kind of feels crammed together. And there was another movie that I really think is a great horror movie that I was hanging out with the producers on that I had no idea that was initially a drama, and they changed it to be a horror movie in order to get theatrical. And that was It Follows. It Follows initially was just a drama.
Yeah.
And that was changed to be a horror movie. So you're seeing a lot of this now. You're seeing a lot of sort of like these, I'm not dogging on these films, but there's a lot of movies that you can tell have been sort of forced into the genre. And I think a lot of what's been lost in the genre is the fun sort of technique aspect just scares. And so now you're getting a whole lot of like reboots and remakes, like, Michael Myers and all that kind of shit. And you're missing some of the really fun, like old school.
So how do you define the genre between horror and thriller? Is horror just a movie that's got the jump scares in it and the gore versus a thriller was more psychological, or how are you seeing the difference?
I've been getting a lot of crap for this because people have watched my movie after I go through the process of doing horror stuff, and it doesn't fit a lot of their criteria, and they're like, your movie's not a horror. And I go, yeah, it is. Like for me, I think the definition for horror is if there's anything that happens within your film, if your film is centered around something that is truly scary, something that is truly horrific, that's horror. And so for some people, the
final scene is extraordinarily horrifying.
Oh, what, in my movie?
Yeah, in a way that is not. Yeah, it's not a jump scare.
No
scene.
Yeah.
And it's a way that you're like, oh gosh, that's not the type of way I felt. That's not the type of horror that I would have expected to experience seeing any movie, right? There's the typical like, oh, monster's going to come get you, or you might die, or like that's, I feel like the normal your life is threatened type horror. And yours, I don't want to spoil anything, but it was different than that. And I can see, I kind of thought that as I was watching it, like, well, what is a horror movie? Not that I'm not scared, but
yeah, it's a good question. What is it?
But what's a comedy? Does comedy mean you're laughing every 30 seconds, or is it?
I mean, but it's like if you watch a movie and you're genuinely scared by it, I feel like it has horror elements in it. And I think that the movie I made has, I guess it's more cosmic horror, which is a lot more cerebral and a lot slower. Like there's jump scare horror, there's gore horror, there's all sorts of different types of horror that exists out there. And I think that, like music genres, you have subsets of rock and roll, right? You've got subsets of R&B, and you've got subsets of hip hop. Like, is it gangster?
Yeah.
And so I think at the end of the day, and then when you actually think about it, they only categorize these movies in order to market them. So you only put genres on films in order, what shelf did I used to put it on in Blockbuster? Does this go in the horror section? Or does this go in the action film section? And what a lot of filmmakers try to do, and what I like to do, is crossbreed stuff. So like if you're going to do a horror action movie, that to me is fun. It's got elements of both those things. Because if you're falling too far into the format, it's predictable. You know what I mean? Like if you're like, all right, this is, another Ring. Then you know exactly what's happening. Oh, yeah, so this is Japanese horror. This is J horror. Got it. Like that's the category. I know exactly what's happening beat wise. Boom, 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 boom.
Yeah, and I think that's what makes like the superhero movies unfulfilling for me.
Yeah,
certainly people like them, but it's like I know how this is going.
Yeah.
Like, before I go, you give me a 1 30-second trailer, I tell you the whole outcome of the film.
Yeah, and the thing that's really tough as a filmmaker is that you want there to be a sense of surprise. You want there to be a journey, but then you also have to process how it's going to get marketed, right? Because most people don't go see things that they don't understand. Like if there was some like wacky trailer with like a couple of images on it, what's pulling you to go see it? Is it the music? Oh, guess what? They took a Madonna song and they changed the background beat and made it more symphonic. And now when you're watching the trailer, it kicks nostalgia to you. And you're like, well, I think I kind of want to see this movie. What's it about? I don't know. So like there are all these tricks to get an audience interested, especially in a modern cinema where there's so much content. Like there's so much content. So like, how do you even get people to tune in? How do you even get people to take the time? Because with social media, everybody's scrolling through something. Like, how do I get you to stop looking at whether or not that last bikini pic you put online got all the traffic you wanted it to? Oh, I'm sorry. I have to do some interesting new technique to get your interest in it. So,
yeah. What was your journey like to get started as a director?
Well, the short form to the longer story was that when I was a kid, I was a terrible student. And so I was grounded consistently. Like I was not allowed to watch TV. And so my parents, I was one of 4 kids. So like they would go watch TV and my mom was like, your grades suck, you leave the room. So I ended up reading a lot of comic books when I was younger. And that was how I filled my time. And I became enamored with telling a story within a 2-dimensional frame. And I was really interested in like the gaps between panels and comic books, because comic books do such an interesting job of like conveying energy, but your mind fills in the blanks in between panels. And I was like, that's cool. And so I thought I was going to be a comic book artist for a while, and I was trained to do that. And I was taught on how to paint and use all the skills that I had to try to tell stories that way. And then I didn't get into art school. Like my grades were terrible. And I happened to be also working in a music store when I was a kid. And I loved introducing people to new music, new songs and new stuff. And I said, well, maybe I'll do something in the music world. Maybe I'll be a radio DJ. And so I went to a community college for radio. And my first show, which was like late, it was like 3 a.m., community access radio show. And the program manager came in and he said, all right, Mike, so at the top of the hour, you play all the CDs that are marked with a blue sticker. And at the bottom of the hour, you play all the CDs that are marked with a red sticker. And I go, why am I here? Like,
Yeah.
What is the purpose of this?
We could load all these up in advance, right?
Yeah. Like, what am I doing here? And so I happened to be taking a film course just for credits. And this was, late 90s. So YouTube didn't exist. People weren't as enamored with the behind the scenes of, like, the guy at the gas station couldn't tell you how they did the effects on Jurassic Park yet. And so when I went and watched Bladerunner in this film course for the first time, the professor went, what'd you guys think of the outfits? And I went, oh shit, someone actually does that. And so it really opened my mind, and I thought about it and I went, man, this is everything I love. This is like everything I love about comic books, but also what I love about music. And I think directing is my path. And I went to an intensive film course in New York, directed 3 short films and was a cinematographer for 6 others. And then moved back to Boston after that and started my own production company. And that was 20 something years ago. And I haven't had a real job since.
How do you determine which stories you want to tell then, from that? I know you're sort of attracted to the horror genre, but how do you figure out what stories you want to tell?
What you end up doing is like, it takes time for these things to gestate. So it might just be something simple that you hear about. Like with 12KM, I had heard about the actual Russian drill team. That's based on reality. Like there was a Russian drill team in the 70s that started to drill the deepest hole known to man. And it was sort of like a space race down into the planet. And I had heard about that from a friend who had heard about it on a podcast, or he had read it somewhere. And I read this article on it. And I was like, this is a cool idea, but what am I going to do with it? Like I had no idea. So I just wrote it down in a book somewhere, and I talked to some people and I just put it away. And that kind of happens with a bunch of different ideas. I may have an idea for a scene. I may have an idea for a theme, or even just a moment. And I'll go, man, that's really cool. And now I just learned that I'll just grab a book and I'll just make notes in a book and I'll put it away. Because then what happened later with me with 12KM, I had been running a production company for years, and we were doing music videos and commercials. And I had always wanted to do movies, but you get lost in the game of like, I got to keep this company open and I have to like employ these people. And I got pretty miserable. I sort of hit a point where I'm like, what am I doing? I'm just, paying for my friend's car payment. Like, what is the purpose of this? And I went on a date with this girl who I was friends with, and we started to date. And she's like, I want to go ice skating. And I've never put ice skates on in my life. And I said, yeah, let's go do something else. And eventually she came back around to it. She goes, you keep avoiding what I want to do. I'm like, oh, okay. All right, let's go on an ice skate date. Let's do it. And we go to, I don't know if you've ever been to Boston, but there's a big pond in the center of Boston, Frog Pond. Yeah. We go to Frog Pond, and I'm putting blades on my feet. And I've never done it before. And I'm thinking to myself, like, all right, maybe I'm going to twist an ankle. And so I climb on the ice with her, and she's towing me around. Very emasculating, right? So I'm getting.
Are you holding her hand, or you're holding the backside of her sweater?
Yeah, like a scarf.
Yeah.
So
you have a leash.
She's towing me around, and I'm feeling very frustrated. And I say to her, like, "Do me a favor, just skate away, figure your stuff out. I'll figure this out. I'll catch up with you." So she skates off, and there's this like 10-year-old that's like doing pirouettes around me. And shows up next to me, and I turn and I look at him, and I watch him push off, and I go, all right, I got that. And so I do the same thing. I push, but I slip, and my whole body goes stiff. I slip, and I go completely back, and I land on my skull, and the last thing I hear is an oak barrel crack, and I'm out. Oh. And so, yeah, man. And so I wake up to a flashlight in my eyes, and there's a doctor looking down on me, and I'm like, in the moment, I'm going, man, like I broke my leg. I passed out. I've got all this work to do this week. This is the worst. And he looks down at me and he goes, all right, so here's the deal. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. You've cracked your skull.
Dude.
You're bleeding internally. There's a hematoma forming on the top of your brain. What we normally do is we drill in to release the pressure, but it's on the main blood vessel on your brain. So if we drill too deep, you die instantly. And he goes, so what we're going to do is we're going to see if it stops bleeding, and you can't go to sleep, and you should call your family. And so
this is the worst date ever.
Yeah. Yeah. And so she's still there with me. She's in the intensive care ward with me. And so we go through the process of, she meets my family for the first time that way. It's really great. Yeah, it's really great. And so we go through the whole thing. I'm in intensive care for 5 days. And so because I really can't go fully to sleep, and the hematoma is pressing on my brain, I'm starting to hallucinate. I'm seeing some crazy shit. And as a filmmaker, I'm fascinated by it. And so I have her there with me, and I'm like, you got to record this. And so I'm like trying to dictate what I'm going through. And I'm like, the shadows in the room are moving, and my inner voice, it's not mine, it's somebody else's. And so I had all this stuff. So I went through intensive care 5 days, bleeding stopped. The recovery process of the concussion, everything else took 5 months. And in that period of time, I was incredibly inspired by everything I was going through. And so I'm like, I'm going to write this idea about you not being able to have your inner voice isn't yours. And it brought me back to the Russian thing, because I had to have like an origin story for this creature. And I was like, man, this is that Russian thing I wrote down. That's cool. And so then I brought that back in and sort of crafted it around that. And so I think that's how ideas work, is that you find something that you find interesting, or you hear a story from someone that you find interesting, and you just write it down. And when I was younger, I'd try to make those work quick. I'd be like, this is an idea. And you're trying to work on it. And you're like, I can't figure this out. And it's because it needs time to gestate.
Is that, I mean, that makes a lot of sense in the world, right? It removes the pressure of having to create, flawless content immediately after generating an idea. And I think that holds me back a lot of times. I'm like, I have all these ideas. And then only am I going to pick the ones that I can execute on tomorrow. Everything else goes off somewhere. How do you make sure that you pick it up again, though?
You don't, it's weird. Sometimes I learned this when we were doing music videos for years. So music videos is tough. You'll get a call from a record label or band, and they'll go, hey, we've got this new album and this new song. We need a video in 2 weeks. And you're like, what? And they oftentimes will send you some lame ass idea. So they'll send you some breakdown where it's like, this guy comes back from the war and he misses his wife. And you're like, I've seen that 100 times. And so now you have to listen to this song and connect with this individual and try to come up with something great. What I learned to do was that I would have what I would call an inspiration folder that was on my desktop, which anytime I was surfing the internet, anytime I read anything, anytime I had anything that spoke to me, I would put in this folder. So it was always existent there. So whenever I'd have a new idea come in, I would always start by just going through my inspiration folder or going through my notebooks. And so whenever you have ideas or have inspirations, it's not about seeing them come. I never look at them as like, this will eventually become something. I always look at them like, this is something now in this inspiration folder. That's all it needs to be, is a source of inspiration that will trigger something else. Because at the end of the day, I'm not replicating that. It's not that I want to it's not like I just saw the new Christopher Nolan movie and I'm like, oh, the reverse fighting is so cool. And so now I'm going to go make a movie that is the same shots of reverse fighting. No, I just understand that language that he created by that could be used for something else in some other sort of variety. And so I'll just put that away and go like, yeah, think about this. And so then later, when I crack my skull on the ice again, and then I am in need of a new idea, maybe that scene will inspire.
I think that we could do that in our businesses too, is to give it there's a lot of pressure to get every single thing you could ever do to improve your business in that annual business plan. It's like, let me write everything down. And then we got to do it. And, in my experience is every year we set 1,000 different objectives and, it'll be April or hell, we won't even make it past February before we realize that we don't even care about that one. That one, we're not even going to, I didn't even start on that yet.
I have seen some business plans like that where they essentially took their, as Mike says, their inspiration folder and dumped the whole thing into their business plan. And there's no priority. And I think you've got to figure out and decide what is the idea you want to go with, and I'm sure you've got some great ideas in the inspiration folder. When you look through that, what causes something to jump out at you and say, oh, I'm going with this? Is it just sort of an intuition or a gut feel, or is there a more analytical determination on how you're going to align an idea with the story you want to tell?
I mean, it's not very analytical. It shouldn't be.
Okay.
With anything that you do, especially in my business, everything is reactionary. I was just editing something the other day, and it was making me think of a quote. I'm going to misquote this person, but it was a quote that I vaguely remember from the editor of Dune, the latest Dune movie. And so when you're cutting stuff, and I've spent years as an editor, when you're cutting stuff, there's a technical way to edit, right? You can edit for continuity. So if in a wide shot, my hand moves like this, and in the close-up shot, my hand moves like this, then I'm trying to match the movement between those two things. That's like a very simple way to cut. And if you have that sort of continuity, then the audience isn't distracted. They go, right, he reached for this thing. But if that's the only reason why you cut, your shit's boring. Like, it's just boring. And so his quote was, I do stuff until I feel something. And if I feel something, that means the audience is going to feel something. And so that means that I've done it right. So then oftentimes I will do the same thing. I'll go through my entire edit hunting for stuff, and I'll look for footage, and I'll look through everything. I already know where it's all going to go, but I'm looking fresh again. And sometimes I'll play something in reverse. Like you guys are talking about the end of 12 Cam. I'm not going to give anything away, but I will say there's a sequence where there's a guy in super slow motion and he's covered with this stuff and he's moving through the air. I cut that stuff first. I went through and was looking at that footage, and I was playing it in reverse, and I was playing it fast forward, and I was looking for what made it really interesting. And there was this awesome side effect of him being covered in what they call ultra slime, which is this very slimy material. And we were shooting in a very hot studio, and we're shooting very slow motion. And so as he's whipping the slime around, it's sort of coming off his hands, and it's evaporating instantly. Like it's solidifying in the air because it's warm, and it's floating in the air. And I remember looking at that in the footage going, that is trippy and that is weird and very scary. And so then I went backwards. So I built that first and went in reverse on that because I felt something, like it triggered something within me.
You're
So
like, I want to use this.
well, I mean, I want to feel this.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yes.
Yeah. And I mean, it's the same thing with the head injury. Like, I don't want you to go through the process of having a head injury, but I want you to feel what it's like. I want you to like go through the process of being like, it's fucking terrifying if I don't trust my inner voice.
Yeah.
You know? So that's what our business is. That our business is it's smoke and mirrors, but we're trying to convey what we witness as humans in a safe way for you. You know,
That's super interesting. So one thing that I've always thought of, like the director role, obviously I've never played it. I've never been a director of any film, play, TV show, anything.
it's overrated.
It's okay. Why? What makes it overrated?
Because this is what I talk about on my podcast all the time. Anytime anybody talks about our business, it's always put through like super shiny Instagram filters. You know what I mean? It's like you always see those pictures of like the guy with a camera on his shoulder leaning up against the Lamborghini and he's like living my best life, hashtag. And it's like I direct on average per year, probably 5% of the year, like physically in front of or behind a camera doing the work. Most of our job is begging, it's pleading, it's business pitching, it's business plan, it's researching, it's tons of research and development. It's like just forming bonds and relationships and having beers and going places. And so if at the end of the day, what we want to do as directors is make movies. And if you're going to judge your life based upon how often you're making movies, then it's a failure. Like it really is. And it's depressing. And so one of the reasons why, I'm not plugging the show, but one of the reasons why I came up with the podcast is I wanted to reset my brain after the head injury and go, all right, man, it isn't just about the projects that I've done. It's everything in between that's important. And that's actually the job, is all of this other stuff.
The space between the comic panels. Yeah.
You got it, dude.
Yeah.
There it is. Yeah, you got it.
It seems the process of having an idea and then creating it like an actual outcome, an actual product with it. There's got to be a lot of leadership involved. You know, you're leading the sound guy, you're leading the audio team, you're leading the actors, you're leading the costume designers, you're leading the entire process. And sometimes I would imagine you have a very, very, very particular vision that might be difficult to articulate. And other people are not necessarily picking it up in the way that you do because it's already in your brain. You already see it. And they can't just read your mind. And a lot of times that's how I feel as a business owner. It's like, no, I had like, what am I doing to not get the outcome I want? Well, I'm not communicating. I'm not leading. I'm not describing this process or walking people through it in the way that they need.
Yes.
What have you learned on leadership that makes directing more of a like what is allowing you to implement your vision as a director?
Well, it's hard, man. That's the whole job, right? Like how often do you hang out with someone that goes, I had a dream last night, and they start trying to describe a dream to you and it's the most boring thing you've ever heard. And you're like, please stop talking about this because it's not interesting. That's really what we do. And I think there's a lot of misconceptions. I think that I hate it when people go, that guy's a genius. Not to me, but like directors. So if they're like
all the time.
Yeah. Stanley Kubrick's a genius. It's like, no, he's not. Like Stanley Kubrick didn't plop out of his mom one day and go, give me a 21 millimeter. Like he wasn't he wasn't born with those skills. He was in environments in which he was able to learn and develop those skills over a period of time. And so I think one of the most important things that I learned as a leader was to be able to admit that I don't know it all, and to be able to openly admit to my collaborators, like, the reason why you're here is because you most likely know more than I do about what this is. And I have cast you to be here to help me when I turn you and go, yeah, like, I don't know how to do this. Like, what do we do here? And it's because the amount of things that are required to be an innovator, whether you're talking about a filmmaker or someone that is creating new products, you have to blindly trust your instincts and your imagination. I don't know how to fabricate things, like physically don't know how to do stuff. I'm curious about it and I will learn, but setting out like, hey, I want to create this monster out of nothing. What are we going to use? I've heard of 3D printers. How does that work? And so you just don't know. And so at the end of the day, you have to have the confidence as a creator to be able to say that to your folks around you, like, I need your help. That's why you're here, but you're still the leader. And I'm always saying that whenever you're making a movie, it's like you start a train that is out of control. And the movie is a train that is just barreling in a direction. And you're strapped to the front of this train as a director going, get out of the way, get out. Like you're trying to drive this thing in the right path and you're trying to keep it on that path. And if you're in the best case scenario, you have a bunch of talented people around you with trays of selections. And they come in and they go, would you like the steak or would you like the hamburger? And you go, this movie needs a hamburger. Would you like lettuce or would you like cheese? Cheese. Boom, 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 boom. And you're the tastemaker. You're driving what this is. I think the big misconception is that I know what it's going to be. Yeah. Oftentimes I don't. Oftentimes I know how I want to get started. And that is more interesting to me.
Like, so when you say you know how you want to get started, what specifically are you talking about? Are you saying I want to tell the story from this guy's perspective? I want this guy to have a story arc that looks like this, or
could be
something. Is that what you're starting with?
Could be. I mean, it could be as simple as like, I'm incredibly inspired by this musician. And I'm like, this guy is going to score the hell out of this movie. And I love his music. And so when I listen to his music, I see certain things and I just want to work with this musician. So let's start there. It could be that I read something in a newspaper or saw something online. And I'm like, that's cool. And then you start to process these ideas. And early on with these ideas, typically what I do is I start to talk to my friends and the people around me about them. I'm like, wouldn't it be interesting if this kind of thing happened? And they go, I've seen that before. And you go, right, that's where that came from. Or they go, it would be cool if you did it, but it was something like this and something like that.
That's got to be a hard part of the creative process. Is so many ideas that we have are unconsciously influenced by another idea that somebody else had that we saw when we were a kid or listened to last weekend and forgot about, whatever.
It's the zeitgeist, man. Like there's so much shit that's out there. But, the thing I try to tell myself all the time is, okay, so that's out there, but that's told through that specific person's voice. So can I tell that same general story through my voice? And is my voice interesting? Is it a new way to look at this? And I think that is a useful skill to have in the world of like reboots and all that kind of stuff, because now you're like, you hear this all the time. It's from a different voice. It's from a different director's voice. And I think that is interesting to me these days, especially with age. You start to understand that the most valuable commodity that you have sits between your ears. It's that pink fleshy thing that's in there that has been developed with years and years of your personal experiences, like how I handled my first breakup, how I handled the first death that I had to deal with. Like all of this stuff becomes very valuable. So you can hand a script or an idea to 5 different filmmakers, and this is what changes everything for
yeah. Do you think that's the most important thing to get right? Is that voice
having a brain?
the deciding. In other words, there are things that you have to decide. There are 1,000 decisions you have to make as a director.
Sure,
and you've got to get it would seem you've got to get the first one right.
What do you mean?
Well, you were saying, I know where I want to start. I know what I want to do. I want to connect this music. I want to find this person's story arc. I want to have an expression of my voice. Right? I mean, you're starting from someplace, right? Mm-hmm. Or am I missing that? And if so,
you are. Yeah.
What's the most important thing that you think you have to get right that would separate from the, let's say, successful directors from those that just aren't?
Well, I mean, it's a hard question, right? Because it doesn't matter how good you are as a director, this business is so volatile and there's so many variables. I mean, that's why it's uncanny to me. I think that's the big issue with like commerce and in the creative side of this business is that commerce wants it to be a formula. They want to say, I get David Fincher, we do political dramas and we put them in the room together and it's just, well, let's pound these things out. It's like making sneakers, right? But there are so many variables in there that are going to alter that, all the way down to like your initial thought process on it. And so
it's like, you remember that there was some commercial years ago where these people come into a boardroom, like ad executives, and they were like talking to the marketing team. They go, yeah, so we've got an idea. So, one, we create a viral video. Two, like, what? You do what?
It's like the Steve Martin joke. How do you become a millionaire? First, get $1 million.
Yeah, it was. And so it revealed how certain people think. And those people have a very valued position, which is to, essentially make sure that the ship doesn't sail into an iceberg, right? Make sure that this whole effort can continue to make money and be profitable and operationally remain sound. But they're not the creative people, and they're not coming up with new ideas. And so they want a formula. You can't create a formula for every single thing. Otherwise it loses its beauty, right? If there's too much order, then there's zero chaos. And the beauty in life comes between blending and balancing order and chaos. I think that like a lot of what you say in the creative process speaks to me, not because I'm an artist, but because I think that starting a business and running a business, creating an idea or something out of only an idea, that is an artistic process in a way. It doesn't feel like it as a business
it is
owner.
though. It is.
It's a creative process, though.
It's very much a creative process. And I try to approach my role as an advisor as it's equal parts scientist, equal parts artist. Sometimes, if I approach it robotically, I'm not going to be successful and I'm going to miss the humanity of the person who's standing in front of me. A lot of times people will talk to me, they'll say, what should I do? I go, here's your textbooks. Here's what I would recommend if you're a robot. Here's what I recommend since I know you, Mike. And that's the art side of it. The people who start businesses and people who are artists both rate highly in trait openness, where people who run, multi-billion dollar companies and people who run the, finance arm of the Hollywood machine, they don't rate high in openness, but they have other skills.
Yeah. And you need those skills. I mean, there's a lot of glorification in creativity. And I think it's important to always be imaginative. And I think there's 100 different ways to do it. And when I'm not making movies, I'm cooking because it has that same level of creativity for me. But I also, every time we start a new thing, it's a new business. Like I'm setting up new budgets. I'm setting up all this new stuff for each and every project I do. And so my biggest issue is that I'm constantly internally, I just talked about this morning. I'm internally in a fight between the producer brain and the creative brain. And as a creative director, I'm just like, no, I don't give a shit how long it takes. We got to get this right. And then there's the other side of me that's like, I convinced this guy to let me shoot.
We're out of money.
That's the drama. But they both need each other. I think that if I existed in a world that didn't have the reality side, then I would never finish anything.
I heard a friend of mine say, it was a great line years ago. He said that when you get over resourced, you lose creativity.
Yeah.
And, and I noticed that in businesses or, people that have plenty of money, they don't have to get creative. They don't have to figure things out because they're just like, oh, we'll just buy another thing.
What do you do about that then? You
get creative.
Throw your money away? I mean...
No, you just go into it with some caution, with some filter to say, maybe I don't just buy my way out of this. Maybe I look at ways that are solution that are not just throw money at the problem.
Well, I mean, to give you an example of what we do, like there's oftentimes I like to set parameters. So I like to set a fence around what it is that I play in. So that parameter may be, all right, I have to shoot this in 2 days. That parameter may be, I have to use one actor, two actors. That parameter may be budgetary. And then, so now that I know that that's my parameters, within that, there are a million different ways that I can make it cool and make it interesting. And I have those walls to bounce off of. So I could push myself to a certain limit and go, but I've only got one actor. So how do I tell the same thing that I was going to tell with 5 actors with 1 actor? And then how do I do all this in 1 location instead of 3 locations? So what ends up happening, and this is a question I get asked by a lot of young filmmakers that listen to my show, they're always like, how do you develop your personal style? You have a style. And what happens over time after you work long enough, people recognize your style. Like if you saw my next movie after seeing 12 Cam, you'd go, this is one of Mike's movies. Now, it's not like I was born with this style. It's not like I specifically set out to make this style. And what's even more interesting is that the interesting stuff that makes up what my style is from screw ups. It's from mess ups. So I have been attempting to try to create something in the light of another filmmaker or another film that I liked, and I just don't have the resources.
Well, you're the one that leaves them in and makes that, that artistic decision to keep that in the film and go, oh, this is cool.
Right. And then you adjust it. And then the process of adjusting it makes it your own personal style.
I think most good filmmakers have a voice. You look at, I can tell a Tim Burton movie right out of the gate. I can tell a Wes Anderson movie right out of the gate. There's some that have that voice. I think you have to, and I think, even in business, you've got to figure out what your voice is, to be able to make decisions based on that authenticity.
I like what you were saying earlier about starting with the, you knowing that something needs to be said. That's what I hear from like a lot of writers. Yeah, I write this idea down. I don't know what I'm going to write. I don't know how this book's going to end. I don't know how this poem's going to end. I don't know what this song is even necessarily about, but I know that line was awesome. And I got to write that and then keep going. And that's in some way how I approach businesses. Well, I know there's something I'm aiming at, and I'm not going to figure out the next 10 years worth of business plans right now, but I'm going to figure out that I'm aiming in this general direction because it speaks as authentic truth to me. And if I can pursue that, then I'll figure out the lines in between, I'll figure out how it ends. I'll figure out the budget somewhere along the way. I'll figure out I'll figure out who I need to hire somewhere along the way. And you can't operate shooting from the hip forever. Right. But I think a lot of times people, they exist in the valley of indecision for indefinitely because they think they have to have all the answers before they start, right? They think they have to know how the movie's going to end before they start writing the screenplay.
Yeah, dude. Or you think that the best case scenario has to happen before you get going. Like, oh, this is such a good idea, and I have to make sure that I have the right money, or I have to make sure I have. It never happens. Like you'll sit around forever waiting for the elements to form the way that you think you're supposed to form in your brain, and it just never fucking happens. And there's so many friends of mine that are so afraid of failing that they're like, I'm not going to get started until I have more time and I have more experience. And it's just like, well, yeah, but doing it and oftentimes failing is what makes you successful. Like you have to go through the process of doing it.
Yeah. If I wanted to know the exact right path forward, I would try infinitely until I found the answer. Can't try infinitely, so I might as well try once.
Usually with big things, there's never the perfect time. It's like with having kids. There's never a great time to have kids. There's never a great time just like, oh, I'm going to start, I'm going to run a marathon. I've got to start training, and you just have to
get in shape before I start training.
Right.
Once I lose weight, then
I lose 30 pounds, then I'll do it. Right. No, you just got to start.
Right.
A friend of mine, he recently started his business just like a couple weeks ago, and he would for months call me and say, "Oh man, this effing job I got, this boss." And I was like, "Well, you told me you have this idea that you want to start." Well, yeah, I'm going to, but. And he always had some reason, it was, well, this is going on at work, or I got to find this. I got to figure out who I'm going to hire. I got to think. And I was like, dude, you're working 60 hours a week for someone else. You can't figure out all the answers to how your business is going to work because you're burning 60 hours of brain power every single week on something other than your business. Yep. And so finally I started to, every time he would call me,
you're just giving him a hard time.
I was just like, yeah, cool, man, whatever. When are you doing it? When are you doing it? And finally he did. And I think every single day for the past 2 weeks, he's called me, dude, you're not going to freaking believe it. This happened. Oh, I figured this out. Oh, I just had this idea. I was like, yeah, man, you weren't going to, that none of that was going to happen as long as you were waiting for it to all fall together.
Yeah. And dude, I learn more from my failures than I do from my successes. So when you do something successful, people are like, great job. And
Oh yeah.
you know, but
It's
when you fail, you see the emails that I get from people that are just like, you're an arrogant blah, 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 because of the stuff I'm doing with 12KM. And or they'll watch my movie and they go, I hated it, blah, 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 blah. So like, I'm always looking at negative stuff almost as hard as I'm looking at the positive stuff.
How do you deal with, so in the business that Sanger and I are in, it's a very private advice giving business. We're talking to people about their money and their investments and their goals. And so it usually doesn't leave the family, right? In your business, you're putting it out there for public consumption and you're going to get what you hope is mostly positive feedback, but there's always those assholes who are like, oh, this is crap. How do you deal with that?
I love
it.
It
Would
man.
destroy me.
No, dude. So here's what there's a couple things to learn from it. Whenever I look at negative reviews, I'm always reading it because they're always very passionate, right? So if someone watches something that they thought it was going to be a certain way and it wasn't a certain way, or if it doesn't align with their life ideas as a character, they get real passionate about it. And so you'll have people like, trying to write to your mom to tell her never to have you in the past. You know what I mean? So like, I find it fascinating. And so when I read a negative review, what I do is I generally look at it from a bird's eye perspective first. Can this person use good grammar? And are they going crazy with their grammar because they're emotional, or are they going crazy with their grammar because they've never bothered to learn grammar? I get that. I barely know how to use grammar. So I read that first, right? And I go, all right, where's the perspective of this guy? And it's like, all right, he was upset because this wasn't in the movie. He didn't think that there were enough jump scares in the movie. Roger that. And if it's someone that wrote to me and sent me their 3 favorite horror movies, I'll look at what their 3 favorite horror movies are and go, got it. Scream, this, that, this. I got it. But oftentimes when I look at it, it's the same reason why I like to watch movies in the theater. There's this weird thing that happens where I don't understand the science behind it. But if I play you a piece that I'm doing with you guys in the room with me, you guys don't have to say anything. I'm not even paying attention to you. Suddenly I see it through your eyes. It's this strange thing that happens. So whenever I watch something that I've been working on for a long time and you get hung up on details like, oh, the cut's right and the colors are right, I'll sit and I'll watch it with the two of you and I'll feel it. I'll go, fuck, that's wrong and this is wrong and that's wrong. Just from observing it with you. And if I can't get that, I'll also get that from negative feedback. I'll go to the negative feedback and go like, all right, there's been enough people that have complained about this music cue that I thought
maybe these people have something here.
Like there's consensus here.
Yeah, I thought that was really great. So I think that's cool, but I put them out there. I put them out there because negativity sells. And so these people, I always joke with them. They're like, you should never make movies again. They do these posts. And I say, I screen grab them and I post them. And they go up and they go, well, why are you posting it? And I'm like, because I posted 2 comments on Instagram. And here's how the algorithm works. I posted a really positive comment. And I now have like 75,000 people or something. I post a positive comment. Instagram decides that 5,000 people, not even 2,000 people get to see that post. Okay. That's what you decided, algorithm? Okay. I post a negative comment. Instagram decides 45,000 people see that comment. And then what happens is there is an internal battle. Now that I've got fans that are supportive, I don't have to say anything. The fans will jump in there and they'll go, you don't know, blah, blah. And
you suck, Mike's awesome.
And then that thing starts to roll even further.
Oh, that's great.
And it's fun. And for most people that leave negative things, they never really expect to hear from the director. And I will comment. So like someone will post like, this guy's just doing it for this and he's doing it for the money. And I'll just write underneath, I'll go, well, what do you mean? And as soon as they see the director writes, what do you mean? It changes everything. I had one guy go, I never want to see this movie. I go, are you sure? And I just write that underneath. And he goes, oh my God, yeah, I'd actually love to see this movie. And then he ends up being a guy that really loves to film. So
that's so funny.
That's funny.
As soon as you shine the light on the negativity, people they have to reconcile with your humanity a little bit.
Yeah,
there's Kevin Holland. He's a UFC fighter.
Mm-hmm.
He is he just loves to talk shit in all of his fights. I mean, he just talks while the guy could be kicking his ass. He could be kicking the other guy's ass. Doesn't matter. He's going to talk. And so for that, like, he gets maybe even a little bit more hate than other people, although he's generally like a very well liked fighter. Anytime he gets a hate comment, the guy responds. Like anytime he gets a hate comment, and he doesn't ever respond like, he doesn't really respond with hate. He doesn't really respond with love. He's just like, oh man, no way. Like, I suck. Oh, damn.
I love those, man. They're so fun. They're so much fun because, and I think a lot of people forget that the internet's not a void. And so like when you're putting things out there, someone's listening, and there are we live in a weird time frame right now where there really aren't movie stars anymore. There was a period of time where like you would look at like the Bruce Willises, you would look at the Arnold Schwarzeneggers, you'd go back and look at the Cary Grants. You look at these people who were movie stars. They were elevated. You could never get in touch with them. You could never meet them. And if maybe you would stand outside of a premiere or some club that they were at and you'd go, Bruce, and maybe you could sign my t-shirt. That was the only exchange that you would have with these people. But now with social media, you can literally write to anybody.
Yeah.
And chances are, because everybody's
they might
addicted.
See it. Yeah.
Most likely, dude, I was just on set with an actress yesterday who was scrolling through looking at social media all day. So they are seeing this stuff. And so it's a weird place that we're in right now where you can communicate with these people. And a lot of it gets real toxic. A lot of it is jealousy based. A lot of it is anger based. But there are also like really solid, supportive people out there that want to feel connected to the work and want to feel connected to the community. And that's been the big solid byproduct of releasing 12 Chem this way, is now there's a diehard community of people that are writing to me all the time. Hey, I saw this movie. Have you seen this movie? Hey, my friend just made this film. What do you think of this film? What are you doing next? What's happening next? So the excitement that you guys felt when you wanted to send me your list, that continues. And I think that there's a reason why I've spent, dude, I've written like 60,000 DMs since November. Like there's a reason why I've gone through the long process of this, is that I feel like the community that's building around it will then support the work that comes next for it. So,
well, I'm excited to be a part of that community and hear what you're doing next. Yeah. He's not cool. It's fine.
So I don't even think I could find your DM that I didn't answer.
No. Expect a link though.
What is next for you, Mike?
Well, I got a couple things going on. Like, 12 Cam has a feature script that is being developed right now, and it is with Ridley Scott's company, which is crazy, Scott Free. I have another movie called Who's There, which is in development, which is another feature. I have a short for that I was very similarly a proof of concept short that never got released to the public. I may do another release online where I don't know what the thing will be yet, but we'll figure that out. And then I just finished shooting this weekend, in my last 2 days of shooting, on a new piece that is really cool and very scary and cerebral too. So, and then my girlfriend, so the girl that took me on the date and tried to kill me, we're still together. We've been together.
She kind of had to stick with you.
She couldn't leave right away.
She couldn't leave.
No. That's probably a 30-day you can't leave at least.
Oh, that's a solid month. Pity
that's a month of pity stay with you. Yeah, you can't leave right after that. Yeah.
Well, I mean, my favorite part is that I still have that card. So whenever she wants to do something that I really don't want to do, I go, sounds like ice skating.
No, you got to play that for sure. For sure.
We've been together.
Hey, Mike, before we let you go, you got to answer the question that you put out there. I'm sure you've been asked, what are your 3 movies that you would answer on your favorite 3 horror movies?
Well, they rotate. The ones that stay at the top for me all the time is Alien. So Alien, Ridley Scott's Alien, I think is a perfect horror movie. The Thing, John Carpenter's The Thing is another one that, like you were talking about movies that influenced you when you were a kid. I saw that when I was a kid and it blew my mind.
Yeah.
And the third one I rotate consistently. Sometimes it's got newer ones on it. Sometimes it's got older ones on it. Today, I would say Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds would be my third one today.
Nice.
It's a classic.
Tippi Hedren in it. I even know the actress. On The Thing, are you talking about the original one or the one with Kurt Russell?
So the one with Kurt Russell, the original one is fantastic. And the reason to watch the original one is for that fire scene that happens in it where the guy dressed as the monster comes in the room. I don't know how they did it. Guy dressed as the monster comes in the room and an actor has a bucket of kerosene and another actor has a torch and they throw kerosene on the stuntman, which splashes all over the room. They light it on fire and an actor has to cover themselves with a mattress to not burn to death. And that happens in that movie. So it is worth watching specifically for that scene. But no, John Carpenter's The Thing, which is the one with Kurt Russell.
Nice. And so where can people connect with you on your movie and see it?
Well, you could try to write me a DM with your 3 favorite horror movies at Mike Pecci on Instagram. You can check out trailers for my movies at mikepecci.com. Do people even go to websites anymore? But at mikepecci.com, you can go there. Listen to my podcast, In Love with the Process. What I try to do on my show is like on episodes, I'll release a password on an episode of the show for the people that I didn't get to the DMs on. So they can also get to be able to see 12 Cam by listening to the podcast, which is about filmmaking. It's about barbecue. It's about rock stars. It's basically a show in which I talk to whoever I want to become friends with. So
that sounds like exactly what we're doing.
Us too.
Yeah, man.
Super cool, man. Well, love the movie. Love talking with you. I learned a lot.
Thanks, man.
Thanks so much for your time. And I'm excited to see what you do next.
Thanks a lot, Mike.
Thank you, guys. It was a lot of fun chatting.
That was a fun conversation with Mike. I really enjoyed talking with him. It's fascinating talking with somebody who makes movies for a living because it's so different from what we do, and yet we can be creative in a different way. My takeaway from the discussion is really around making a decision to start an endeavor that even if you're uncertain about it, you have to decide at some point, even though you're not ready, to start. And to start during that creative process, to start with your authentic voice and being true to how you want to approach that and being consistent with what that voice is and finding it and letting that come through the work that you're doing creatively.
Yeah, I like what you said about how it's so different, but it is so similar too. Filmmaking, we were able to draw a lot of analogies to how we work in our own lives and businesses. My takeaway from our conversation with Mike is giving yourself the freedom to set an idea down. He talked about his inspiration folder. Now he revisits that when he needs inspiration. A lot of times I feel like if I don't create an immediate action plan to execute on an idea that I have, that I've wasted an opportunity. And sometimes I'm not at the point in my life or business to be able to execute on all 20 ideas I just had on a random Thursday. I need to write them all down and pick the ones that I can or want to execute on today, and then revisit it later when I need to set my quarterly targets or revamp the business plan or when things change. You just made a great decision to listen to this episode of Decidedly. Make another great decision and leave us a 5-star review wherever you listen to podcasts. We appreciate your support. It helps others find our community and defeat bad decision-making in their own lives. For more daily decision-making insights, check us out at decidedlypodcast.com and on Facebook and Instagram at Decidedly Podcast. Thanks again for listening. I'm Sanger Smith, and this is Decidedly.
Insights, advice, and comments provided by Sean Smith, Sanger Smith, and speakers identified as part of the Decidedly Podcast should not be considered recommendations. Speakers not identified as members of Decidedly are expressing their opinion, and their statements should not be construed as reflecting the views of the Decidedly team. This podcast is produced solely for informational purposes, not personalized advice.